Armored proportions. Gold trim that has absolutely no business being that tasteful on something this aggressive. That is the Azimuth X8. And before we go any further, let me be upfront with you. This is an AI-generated concept design. No factory. No production line. No showroom. Nobody is building this. It exists purely in imagination. And honestly, that is exactly what makes it worth dissecting. Because when you strip away manufacturing constraints, tooling costs, and boardroom compromises, you get to see what design wants to be when nothing is holding it back. Here is what we are doing today. We are walking the exterior, and there is one detail on the rear quarter of this vehicle I have genuinely never seen on a motorhome concept before, and I'm saving it. Then we're breaking down the interior logic, the powertrain thinking, and I'm giving you my full verdict, including the one design decision I think is a mistake. Let's get into it. The first thing this vehicle does, before you even process the scale of it, is communicate a threat. That front fascia is not designed to be welcoming. The LED signature lights cut inward at sharp angles, like a predator narrowing its gaze. Most motorhomes try to soften their face, round the corners, bring in some warmth, because the vehicle you live in is supposed to feel approachable. The Azimuth X8 does the opposite. It leans into aggression deliberately, and then this is the interesting part. Contradicts itself with gold. That badge, those accent lines, the gold-tipped hardware around the lower fascia. It is a psychological contradiction built into the design language. I can go anywhere, and I will do it expensively. That tension is the whole concept in one face. The windshield rakes at a steeper angle than you would expect at this mass. Most heavy vehicles sit the glass nearly upright. Structural necessity, driver visibility. Here the designer pushed that rake further forward, which does two things. It gives the cockpit a fighter jet silhouette from the side, and it signals that whoever is behind that glass is not driving defensively. They are going somewhere specific, fast, and deliberately. Step back and look at the proportion line from front axle to rear. The living module, the hab section, sits elevated above the chassis on what appears to be an integrated body-on-frame design. That roof line is dead flat, not curved, not tapered, not pitched flat. On most motor homes, that would read as a cost decision. Here, combined with the angular body cladding, it reads as intentional. The flat roof creates the military-grade silhouette. It is part of the visual vocabulary. The glass-to-body ratio is lower than a typical luxury coach, and I think that is a genuine design conversation worth having. You have got wide, deep-set windows on the living section, but they are framed by a lot of body material. The designer clearly made a choice, structural confidence over transparency. Whether that serves the living experience inside, we will come back to that. The body cladding uses a chamfered, faceted geometry. Every surface is a flat plane meeting another flat plane at a hard angle. There is no flowing curvature here. This is deliberate. It echoes military vehicle design language while keeping the execution refined through the finish quality and the accent lighting. And that lighting. Thin gold vertical lines run the full height of the body at structural junctions. At night in motion, this vehicle would be unmistakable. That is a brand identity decision embedded in the hardware itself. 6 wheels. 3 axles. Let's talk about what that actually means. A 6x6 configuration on a vehicle this size is not a styling choice, or at least it shouldn't be. It is a weight distribution and terrain capability decision. The rear tandem axle setup means this concept is imagining itself on surfaces where a standard dual-axle coach would be buried. Loose desert. Rocky mountain tracks. Ground that simply doesn't cooperate. The tires are aggressive all-terrain units with a wide space tread pattern. The sidewalls are high. Combine that with what appears to be significant ground clearance, based on the step height required to access the entry door, and you are looking at a concept that is genuinely imagining itself off-road. Not gravel road off-road. Off-road off-road. The wheel design itself is a black multi-spoke unit with gold hardware detailing. It is restrained for something this dramatic. I think that restraint is correct. The wheel should not compete with the body. It frames it. The body finish is a warm champagne sand tone, not quite cream, not quite tan. It sits in a register that most military-inspired vehicles never go near, and that contrast is doing a lot of work. It makes the vehicle look expensive in a way that flat black or raw gray simply would not. The surface reflects light softly. This is a satin or low sheen finish rather than a high gloss, which again reinforces the serious rather than flashy positioning. Now, I told you there is one detail at the rear of this vehicle I want to save. You can see the beginning of it in the rear quarter panel. Stay with me. We are getting there after the interior. The exterior has already told us a significant amount about what is happening inside, if you know how to read it. This is the part one enjoy most. No interior renders, just the exterior geometry, the proportions, and logical deduction. Let me walk you through what I think is almost certainly inside this concept. Start with scale reference. Those all-terrain tires appear to be in the 37 to 40-inch range based on the wheel arch proportion. Using the tire as a scale unit, the roofline of the living module sits approximately 3.5 tire diameters above ground. Subtract chassis height, call it 24 inches, and you are looking at an interior ceiling somewhere in the 7.5 to 8 foot range. That is stand-up height with room to spare. In a motor home, that is not a luxury, that is a psychological threshold. The moment you can stand upright without that instinctive duck, the space stops feeling like a vehicle and starts feeling like a room. The Azimuth X8 appears to clear that threshold comfortably. The habitable length from the front cockpit bulkhead to the rear wall appears to be in the 22 to 26 foot range based on the side profile. Here is how I think the designer likely intended that space to divide. The forward third is the cockpit transition zone, blending driver workspace into a lounge or command area. That elevated cab position demands a step down into the living space, which naturally creates a visual separation. The middle third is the primary living and kitchen zone. The rear third, and this is where the most interesting decisions get made in a 6x6 format, is split between sleeping quarters and the mechanical rear of the vehicle. Those deep-set side windows in the main body section are doing something interesting. They are positioned high on the wall, not mid-wall like a standard coach window. That means the natural light coming in will fall across the ceiling first, then diffuse downward. The effect in a real interior would be soft, directional ambient lighting throughout the day, rather than harsh direct sun across eye level. For someone spending long stretches of time inside, which is the entire premise of a vehicle like this, that is a quality of life detail that is easy to miss in a render, but makes an enormous difference when you are actually living in the space. Based on the mid-body proportions, the kitchen zone likely occupies a galley configuration on one side, probably the passenger side where service access makes sense. At this concept's implied positioning level, I would expect the designer to have imagined an induction surface rather than gas, cleaner, quieter, and compatible with a full electric powertrain. Surface area is the kitchen variable that separates genuine livability from showroom performance. A narrow galley looks great in a photograph. It does not work for someone actually cooking. If this concept is serious about being lived in, and the 6x6 platform strongly implies extended expeditions rather than weekend trips, the kitchen needs a minimum of 4 feet of counter run to function. Rear axle position matters enormously for sleep quality in a vehicle this size. The tandem rear axle configuration means road vibration and sound is directly below a rear sleeping zone. Any serious interior layout at this scale would push the sleeping quarters forward of the rear axle, likely positioning the bed in that transition zone between the mid and rear thirds of the vehicle. Bed orientation in a vehicle this wide, and the body appears to be in the 100 to 105-inch exterior width range, could be transverse rather than longitudinal. A full crosswise bed placement is only possible when interior width exceeds roughly 80 inches, and this concept, if it makes it past the render stage, likely achieves that. A transverse king is a genuinely different sleeping experience in a motorhome. It is the difference between camping and staying somewhere. That forward cab design with the raked windshield creates a cockpit that, from the outside, communicates confidence. Inside, the driver's eye position will be high, perhaps 8 to 9 feet above ground, which on open terrain gives sight lines that are simply unavailable to any conventional vehicle. At this concept's implied technology level, I would expect the designer envision full digital instrumentation, no physical dials, with a large central display managing vehicle systems, navigation, and terrain mode selection. Given the 6x6 platform, a terrain management system, something analogous to Land Rover's terrain response, is essentially mandatory. Here is the detail I keep coming back to, though. That cockpit raked glass means significant solar gain on the driver and passenger on east and west-facing approaches. In a real production scenario, that windshield would need electrochromic glass, the kind that tints on demand, to make the forward cabin livable in full sun. Without it, the dramatic aesthetic creates a practical problem. It is a design decision that looks correct from outside and potentially costs you comfort from inside. And now I promised you the rear detail. Let's go there. If this concept were ever engineered for reality, the powertrain conversation starts with one question: why does a vehicle this capable need to exist off-grid? Because if the answer is extended expedition in remote terrain, and everything about the 6x6 platform points to exactly that, then a diesel generator backup strategy is not good enough. You need primary energy independence. Full electric makes sense at this positioning level for three reasons. First, electric motors deliver maximum torque at 0 RPM, which is exactly what you need when you are crawling over loose terrain at low speed. A diesel powertrain needs revs to build torque. An electric motor does not. Second, a dual motor setup, one per axle group, gives you torque vectoring capability across all three axles. That is a terrain capability multiplier that no diesel configuration can match. Third, silence. In remote expedition territory, silence is a luxury. An electric motor home is a fundamentally different ambient experience. Battery capacity for a vehicle this mass would need to be substantial. We are likely talking in the 200 to 300 kilowatt-hour range to achieve meaningful range at highway speed while also powering full HVAC, kitchen, and systems loads. The closest real-world reference point is the heavy EV coach platforms currently in development for long-haul transit. Those are targeting 350 to 500 miles per charge at commercial loads. A private expedition vehicle at lower continuous speed could conceivably achieve more. The flat roof is the solar play. It is not going to drive the vehicle, let me be clear about that. A roof-mounted solar array on a vehicle this size generates perhaps 3 to 5 kilowatt-hours per day in strong sun. That does not move a 20,000-pound motorhome. What it does do is sustain interior systems, climate, lighting, connectivity, water management, while the vehicle is stationary. In a 3-day backcountry stay, that difference between running a generator and running silently off solar is significant. Smart systems at this level, learning climate that adjusts based on external temperature patterns and occupant preference history, predictive charging that routes to infrastructure based on planned travel, autonomous highway mode for long open road segments, all of these technologies exist today in fragments. What this concept imagines is their integration into a single coherent platform. Whether that integration is 5 years away or 15 is a separate question. What matters is that the concept is asking the right questions. Let me tell you what this concept genuinely gets right, what I think is a problem, what detail I will point to in a design school critique, and the one thing I would change. What it genuinely gets right. The color and material combination is exceptional. That champagne sand finish against black structural elements and gold accent hardware is a palette that communicates luxury without softness and aggression without crudeness. It occupies a space in the design vocabulary that almost nothing else is currently in. Most off-road luxury vehicles go dark, black, gray, military green. The Azimuth X8 goes sand gold, and it earns it. That is a confident call. What seems impractical? The glass-to-body ratio is going to divide people who actually live in vehicles. The low, deep-set windows create a fortress aesthetic that works brilliantly from outside. But natural light, genuine, generous natural light, is one of the most consistent quality of life factors in long-term vehicle living. If you are spending 30 days in the Moroccan desert or the Alaskan interior, that body material ratio might start to feel oppressive by week 2. The concept prioritizes the aesthetic over the lived experience in this one area, and I think it is the design's most honest weakness. The most impressive detail. The vertical gold accent lighting lines integrated into the body structure. They are not surface applied. They appear to be structural, as if the gold trim is actually part of the panel junction system rather than stuck on top of it. If that is what the designer intended, function and decoration as the same element, that is the kind of thinking that separates serious design from styling exercises. What I would change? The roofline. It is flat because it looks powerful from outside. But a slight forward rake on the rear half, even 5 degrees, would improve aerodynamics meaningfully at highway speed, reduce solar gain on the rear sleeping zone, and introduce a dynamic line that breaks the military bunker read without losing the authority. Flat is a statement. Slightly tapered is a statement and an engineering decision. I would make that change. What this signals about where luxury mobility is going. The convergence point between expedition capability and genuine luxury living is accelerating. The Azimuth X8, fictional as it is, represents a design hypothesis that the next generation of ultra-premium mobile living will not look like coach. It will look like infrastructure. Vehicles you do not park at a resort. Vehicles that replace the resort. It is a concept. It is fictional. It is AI-generated. And it is still one of the most considered motor home concepts I have analyzed on this channel. One question before you go, and I want your actual opinion on this: solar roof for off-grid independence, or that space allocated to a larger battery pack for pure range? One answer. Drop it below. If this kind of design analysis is what you come to YouTube for, subscribing is simply the most efficient way to make sure you don't miss the next one.